Please note that in this show, you may hear graphic descriptions or language that may not be appropriate for everyone. Listener discretion advised. Welcome to Parentless Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Rilliford. On this show, we're going to be speaking with others who have experienced the loss of one or both of their parents or parental figures. As we heard in episode 12 with Louisa Velarde, being parentless is like an island, and I don't know how to swim. Thank you for being my life jacket.
Hi, everybody. My name is Miki Spear. I'm a musician, author, and talk show host of The Healing Half, and the guest on this amazing podcast today ran by the one and only Steph. So, Steph, thank you so much for having me here. My mom passed away from colon cancer when I was 13. I'm originally from Minnesota, kind of the suburbs of Minneapolis. And today I want to share with you guys a song that I recently wrote called Light a Candle for Me. We're just going to do a quick little introduction to the song, and we'll talk more about this in a moment. But if you'd like to hear the full song, just head to my website, mikispear.com, because it comes with a free candle lighting ceremony workbook that I'd love for you to have. Some doors can't be opened, and words can't heal a heart that's broken. Holding me in your arms is what you really need. But in the meantime, you can light a candle for me and let the flame light up the room like my smile used to do, and let the memories begin to fill your mind. Don't be afraid to say my name and begin to share your pain, and remember I'm right by your side. No, we can't go back to the way it used to be, but in the meantime, you can light a candle for me. No, we can't go back to the way it used to be, but in the meantime, you can light a candle for me.
Thank you, Miki Spear. Welcome to Parentless Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. What an absolute honor.
Yes, so I want to say you are the first person who has played live on my show, so thank you very much.
What an honor. Again, thank you. I appreciate it. I only did like a snippet of the song because I didn't want to take up too much of your time, but I really appreciate you letting me share today. So my mom's name is Amy. She was this beautiful blonde woman who was full of life and full of energy and a friend to everybody. And when she was 40, so I'm not even going to try to do the math. When she was 40, she was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And as with so many of us, there's always some frustration there, right? Because she had been going to the doctors for many, many months with stomach pain. And it wasn't until after that point, they're like, well, maybe let's try a colonoscopy. And then they found it. So you just can't help but wonder, what if they would have, done a colonoscopy sooner? However, you can't change the past. So she got diagnosed with stage 4. And then after that point, about 2.5 years later, she died. So she was 43 at that point, just turned 43. And the biggest thing is even though she was sick, everybody assumes, oh, you must have had like these really good goodbye moments and been ready for it. But I always like to say, whether you are standing on the train tracks and you can see the train coming, or you accidentally step onto the train tracks right before the train comes, when the train hits, it hurts. And so I was in denial the whole time my mom had cancer. I thought, there's no way God's going to let this happen. She's going to be fine. She was in that way too. We never talked about the possibility of her dying. So when I got the phone call, I just won the state basketball tournament. I'm super tall. I'm 6'4". So I used to play basketball back when I thought I had to play basketball. I don't want to play anymore. And we just won the state tournament. We got a call that my mom had to be rushed to the hospital because she wasn't feeling well. She was dying, essentially. And at that point, by the time we got to the hospital, she was already so high on morphine and all the drugs that they try to put you on to sustain the rest of your life that we never had like a really good conversation. So I know it seems like cancer always assumes it's like this like long drawn out thing, but to me, it still felt sudden because I never allowed myself to think it was possible.
Wow. And I was just thinking, so you said that you were 13 when she passed away.
Yep.
You were 11 whenever you heard this. So you were just young trying to deal with this news.
Yeah.
How did you hear that she had cancer? Do you remember that?
I do remember that. So I remember dog sitting. This dog across the street, I would go over to this older lady's house and walk her dog after school just to earn a couple bucks. And I remember coming back from walking Cleo and my mom wasn't home. And I was like, that's kind of weird. And I had a neighbor come over and be like, honey, like your mom was at the doctor. It's going longer than planned, but like, I'm here to watch you. And I'm like, okay, this is not normal, because she had been going to doctor's appointments. And then my dad called. It's a little fuzzy, but somehow he called me and said, she might have cancer. Stay tuned. I'll keep you posted. And I just remember being in my living room, mind boggled, like, what does that mean? How is that possible? She's healthy. Like, she's a healthy person. This is not. So it was just, I just remember crying in my living room kind of after like the shock of the potential that she would have cancer. Then I'm not sure, I guess, how I found out she officially had it, but it was later that night.
I'm just thinking of that, just that pressure, that situation that you would have been put in as such a young girl. Is there anything that you've learned over the years that you would tell that young girl now?
Yeah. So, so the show that I do called The Healing Half, I always like to say at the beginning of that show, I spent the first 10 years after she died in denial. And so I was very much extremely emotional. And so like anytime somebody started to touch it, I would just start sobbing. So I did my absolute best to make sure nobody could come close and to keep everybody away. And of course, that doesn't last forever. Eventually, all my other aspects of my world were kind of crumbling at that 10-year mark. And I was like, I need help. I need to get some help for this. So what I would tell that young girl at 11 who's just found out through 20, whatever, when I finally decided I have to lean into this and actually acknowledge it was a trauma, I would tell that person and anybody going through really hard emotions, the absolute importance of going to the counselor, letting them in, being honest and crying. You're just cry and cry and cry. Like, you don't have to be strong. It's okay to cry. You are not a bad person for crying. And if your classmates see you cry, who cares? Like, because I was so worried about what people thought after, my mom was diagnosed. And I became really emotional, understandably, because there's so much at home. I didn't know how to process it. I didn't know how to let adults in. So I guess I would just encourage kids to find ways to talk about their fears and to cry. And if it's better to do that in a private setting, which for me it would have been because I didn't want people I knew close to me to do that. I wish I would have let like the school counselors in and really leaned into those emotions rather than tell myself as the oldest child, like, I'm fine. I can do this. I'm going to be okay. Like, it's not a big deal. And obviously that didn't work.
So you're the oldest child. How many siblings do you have?
Yep. So I have two younger sisters. Katie is 2 years younger than I am, and Anna is 8 years younger. And so what's fascinating when you think about loss is each of us lost the same person, but the stories and the after waves were so different for all of us. You know, Anna was 4 when my mom died, and it's just disgusting, and I hate that. You know, because she never really got to know a healthy mom. Mom was sick all of her recollection of her. And even that's spotty because she was 4 when my mom actually died. So Anna's loss is so much more the absence of what could have been and what should have been, where me and Katie at least got to know my mom and got to experience the amazingness that she was. And we had more of a mix where, yes, we still missed her absence, but we also knew her. And so it's kind of this weird thing to see all. And then there's my dad, right? And then he lost a wife and a co-parent, right? So his loss was super different than my loss, which was different than Anna's loss. So that's just the craziest thing about grief, is it just looks so different for so many people.
Did you feel, being the oldest, that you had to step up for your sisters in that time?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I don't think it was ever explicitly said. Like, I don't think my dad pulled me aside and said hey, you need to step up and do anything. It was more just within asks, hey, can you do the laundry? And I think Katie did her own laundry too. I don't know who did Anna's laundry, but I ended up doing my own laundry after that point. And so that was so funny. When I got married, my husband had just a very opposite childhood. And so his mom was so giving and so doing that, he never had to do laundry really until he got to college. He knew how, but never had to. So it's just very different styles, to have a very involved mom versus no mom, where I'm cooking, I'm cleaning, I'm, doing all this stuff. My dad's busy with his own life too. So we're very much independent, doing our own thing. I would say that as far as, babysitting goes, when you're the oldest, you're a natural babysitter anyways. So it wasn't until I could drive that, I started helping out with rides and stuff, obviously, because you couldn't drive until then. But I definitely felt like I kind of had to step up into that mom role. And my family, I guess, overall theme is we're not great. We're working on it at sharing our emotions. So I never had a heart to heart with my sisters about missing mom. It was more unsaid, but we became really close after mom died. And so I think we kind of, in an unsaid way, realized we're all going through a hard time, but we never talked about it. Not healthy. Again, importance of the counselor. And so I would just say, yeah, as an oldest, I definitely felt that. And my dad actually got remarried not too long after. And that's another story. I don't know if you want to go down that path. They're now divorced. That was a whole other fiasco that I don't wish upon too many children, or any children for that matter, even though some second marriages are amazing. This one was not. So that brought its whole new set of challenges amidst the grief. And it was easier for my sisters and I to kind of channel our anger and frustration towards that marriage than it was for us to express our loss and our hurt. So we shared some emotions, but it usually was in that direction.
Right. Well, you said a lot of things that I would like to touch on. I don't know if we'll be able to, but you mentioned you don't have to be strong. And you do have another song that that is a lyric in that song about, you know what I'm talking about? Is it See Me?
Oh, you did your homework. Holy cow. Good for you.
But I just, and I have said this to people even on the show, and I'm not happy that I did this, but oh, you're so strong. That is not what any of us want to hear or need to hear, because we are strong because we have to be, not because we had a choice. And so in your song, I really you're hey, you don't have to be strong. It's okay. Mm-hmm. And I really, you mentioned 10 years before you were able to do anything about it. And my dad actually passed away when I was 13. And so I felt the same way, it's been such a long amount of time, and now I'm finally starting on this grief journey. So I like that we have that in common. I mean, it's not great for us, but that's how we had to deal. So
I'm so glad I met you as well.
Yeah. But I guess to you, sometimes I feel stuck in that 13-year-old role? I don't know. Do you ever feel like you're kind of not really, I don't know. Do you ever feel like that?
Oh yeah. Perpetual middle schooler. Yeah, for sure. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, kind of getting ready for this interview. And I was thinking back to like, what would a normal 13-year-old be going through? And for everyone, I feel like middle school is awkward. Like it's so awkward. Your body is changing. You're kind of getting to that age where romance is starting to infiltrate. So you've got friends who are dating. And if you're like me, you are not dating and you perhaps felt an awareness that perhaps wasn't there before of, oh my gosh, like there's a hierarchy. Like there is pretty girls and there's popular girls and then there's me. And the boys don't go for me. They go for these other girls. And then there's body image and then there's sports teams and you're starting to get advanced classes versus regular. And so middle school is just this extremely divisive, hard terrain anyways, and then mix in the awareness of money and looks and just like understanding better how that fits into the world and sadly why that means more to other people. And there's the rich kids at school. There's after my mom passed away from cancer, money was super tight because we spent so much trying to save her life because normal insurance does so far, but then you're trying to go the extra mile. And so money was super tight and I couldn't afford to go to Abercrombie and Fitch like all the rich kids in my grade could. And it wasn't like everybody was rich, but it was this upper echelon group. And then there was me. And in addition to like already kind of feeling awkward because I was 6 foot whatever in 7th grade, no boys liked me. I wasn't in the rich popular group. Add on that there's this like mom drama and I would never put words to it, but I was so stressed emotionally. I oftentimes think back to that about, do I revert back to that 13-year-old and what would that look like for me? I would say that would be trying to be the cool kid again and trying to, I'm fine. I'm cool. Who cares? Like, blah, 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 blah. Maybe be gossipy a little bit because it's easier to talk about other people and their problems than it is to admit, like, I'm broken and I'm in pain. None of that's healthy. All of it's extremely unhealthy, actually. But I do find myself reverting back to kind of that 13-year-old, like, I have to be invisible in a sense. And yet I secretly want to be seen. I secretly want to be loved. And I would love it if a boy, I'm married now, so I don't need boys to pursue me. But just like that feeling of like, I want to be externally loved, I think comes through a lot. So, oh yeah, who doesn't revert back to some of those middle school bad habits, right?
This is one that we have to talk about because it does happen. So how do you feel that your life has been changed by the death of your mom?
Oh my, yes. Well, I think the biggest thing that any kid, and again, I'm so sorry for your loss too. Virtual hug, us 13-year-old hearts bonded together. Absolutely. There's an independence that has to happen after you lose a foundation of your a cornerstone falls apart. And there's, I would just say after that, my mom's diagnosis was probably the start of that. But after her death was for sure, again, kind of going back to the laundry, the cooking. My dad's a great dad, but he was like, you got to take your school into your own hands. I'm not going to babysit you. Get good grades, and then we won't have to talk about it. So I did. It's so funny. I don't think he ever knew how to like look at a report card online. Like he just was like, are you getting good grades? And I said, yep. And that was it. Like, that was just like, great. Like, that's my job. Whereas like my husband's family, they were like signed into the parent portal, like watching his grades. And that was just like unfathomable to me to have a parent so involved, because I was like, my dad doesn't have time for that. Like, he's busy with his own job, plus 3 daughters, plus a failing second marriage, which we won't even go into, unless you want to. But so I'd say independence and having to grow up really fast was hard. And the biggest thing, when we talk about lying, I don't mean it in a sense of like I did it to hurt people or I did it intentionally to be deceitful. However, with that independence came a image that I wanted to uphold, and I did my darndest to uphold it. And so I would say I wanted to be independent. I wanted people to think I was fine. I wanted everybody to just stop asking me how I was doing and just leave me alone. I'm fine. Can't you see? Don't you see this facade? Can't you tell I'm fine? And so I would say the biggest kind of aftershock of that is this independence, this like deceitfulness that came way too easy. I learned how to throw people off the scent, and I'm not proud of that, because obviously you want to let people in and you want to have people who care about you asking how you're doing to be in on the story and to support you. But that was just not how I did it. So I would say my gut reaction, for whatever reason, was to be this solo person left on a mountain that had everything put together. I was perfect in the sense that I desperately wanted to hold that perfect facade up. And I would say that those after effects of that, whether that's, getting yelled at my first job and then sobbing because I wasn't perfect, even though that's another story. You should never get yelled at a job either, right? Like there's other things there. You're like, that's not right on his end. But there's other areas of my life that this perfectionism and this independence permeated that were bad. And I would say that was probably still is the biggest thing I have to overcome, is letting people in, which I'm much better at that. But that perfection and taking breaks to just relax is almost an unheard of thing. I'm just so go with my real job, my show, my music. Like, I just always feel like I'm chasing the next thing, which is great. It's good to have dreams that you're chasing, but it's also important to relax and like take that pressure off. And I would say all of those are after effects of having to grow up too fast and perhaps trying to avoid feeling by being perfect. Like, if I can control this thing that's out of control, which is grief, is that's just going to go away because I'm controlling my grades. I'm controlling my weight. That's been a huge journey. I'm controlling, everything that I can. And then this unwieldy grief animal, I just pretend isn't barking in the background. And now I'm learning to let the animal and this control go.
Are you now? I mean, I know you have your husband now. Are you still that independent lady?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think another thing that kids who have been, hurt by the trauma of losing a parent, I think we try to convince ourselves, untruly, but we try to convince ourselves, like, if everybody in my life went away, like, I'd be fine, because we try to revert back to that. And, we had to grow such tough skin so fast. I think we try to think, if everybody went away, I'd be fine. I can do this. And I hear those like old voices sometimes like coming back up, and I know I have to crush them because that's not true. Those are all lies. If people close to me passed away, it would be traumatizing. And I just tell myself that to try to like lessen the blow when it happens. So I would say every once in a while, like within our marriage, we'll get into a fight or something, as people do. And for some reason, my gut reaction back when we were like earlier, now this doesn't happen as much, but my gut reaction was, well, if he breaks up with me or I break up with him, I'll be fine. Like, whatever, not a big deal. Like, I'd be okay. I'm independent, which is obviously not true. I love him very much, and I would be devastated. I would be crushed. But I try to convince myself back to that 13-year-old thing, like you're talking about, like that trauma period, reverting back to that. It's a daily conscious choice to not do that and be like, no, Miki, like if your husband broke up with you, you would be devastated and it would be really hard. But it's taking a step back and accepting, like, okay, when these bad things, not that I think he's going to break up with me anytime soon, but like when bad things come, I've had to do a lot of soul searching and like, how do I be okay in a world that trauma could happen anytime? I love my dad so deeply. He is my remaining parent, and the thought of losing him, and I know you can understand this on a way more real level, the thought of losing him will send me crying for like 2 hours. And I just think, how could I survive that? Like, how could I do that? And so in those moments, I just have to trust. My faith is so important to me. I just have to trust, like, okay, like bad things, either he's going to die or someone else is going to, I can't control death as much as I want to. And I do my darndest to try to do that, but I can't control what's going to happen. I can't control if something terrible happens to my dad or my sisters or my best friends or anyone or Sean. I just have to trust that when that happens, I am more equipped today than I was back at 13. Thankfully, I know a lot more, and that God will provide. It's going to suck. It is going to hurt. It is going to change me. You cannot come out of a traumatic loss unchanged. And I will survive. I will be provided for. I will be able to face another day. It just might be really, really hard. And I've had to think about that a lot lately, as you kind of mentioned, like trying to get away from this 13-year-old mindset of, I can do it because I'm strong and I'm tough. It's like, no, I can't. I am very vulnerable, and that's a good thing. I love these people very deeply. And when you love someone deeply and they die, it's supposed to hurt. It's not supposed to be this easy, I'm fine situation. So it's not me who's going to get me through any of this. It's by God's grace that I will be able to survive. And that's helped me a lot. Take that pressure off of that independent streak that does rear its head often in my life. But I had to qualm that and say, nope, I can't do this. My independence can't save me. My control issues can't save me. But thankfully, I know what can. So that brings me a lot of peace as I think about the future and all the ups and downs that are ahead, which is hard to think about sometimes.
Would you consider your relationship with God, is that a part of a coping mechanism that you use?
Absolutely. Every single day, I try to connect. I've got some books that I read, but I love to journal. I love to pray. That stuff, I just feel like it's a conversation in my head, but instead of talking to myself, I'm talking to God. And I would just say that the peace that I have, knowing that there is somebody out there that cares for me and loves me, and trying to trust that and to be okay with that. After losing a parent, it can be tempting to think that the world is this dark, evil, awful place, and it's just a badlands of hell. You know what I mean? Like, it's just this wild, wild west and nothing can go your way. So kind of daily connecting to the fact that, like, I don't know how else to describe it. I'm sorry, I'm doing a really bad job at describing that, but it's my lifeline. It absolutely brings me peace. It brings me hope. Again, just the fact that trauma will happen again. Like, who knows what tomorrow will bring? Hopefully tomorrow's a good day, but there's just as likely of a chance as something terrible happening. And to know that I don't have to do that alone, and to know that it's, in my belief, and that's totally okay if other people don't believe this, but it's to know simultaneously that it's not a me-centered world, and it's not, the world doesn't revolve around me. The world, it's a God world, and the world, this is God's world, and it's his thing. So it revolves around him and his purpose and his stuff. And so if, so that's one thing is, this world is not supposed to be cushy, perfect, because it's not a perfect world, right? Bad things happen. That could be death. That could be the fact that I say something mean that I shouldn't have said. Friendships break up, jobs get lost. Like, it's a broken world, and we know that. So we have one side, but then we also know that in the midst of that, there is hope, and that there is joy in the tragedy and in the hard things that happen. We are not alone. It is not because we did something wrong. There's no rhyme or reason, I don't really think, for any of this stuff, but we can grow from it, and we can use those traumas to help other people. Because we live in this broken world, we can't control that. We can share our journey. And just like you're doing, you're helping so many people by, you're parentless, and you're helping people because of that awful, terrible thing that happened to you. And I just am so grateful that you're doing that. And I think the only way I can kind of like reconcile those two things is through faith and through hope that this is all pointing us in a direction of loving each other better and being a better community for each other. And I'm not sure just straight up biology would point us in that direction. There's not a lot we get out of it, beyond helping other people. So my faith is my world. It absolutely helps me. I don't have an answer for why my mom died. I'm not happy that she did. And it's never like, thanks God. Like I appreciate, nope. Like I have no idea why she had to die at 43. And I don't think I'll ever know until I get to ask and I just say, what the heck happened? But I still have so much peace that I know I wouldn't have had if I didn't have that relationship. I just feel I feel very happy that I'm not the alone as I felt back in my early teen. I felt so alone. I can't even describe the aloneness I felt after my mom died. And it wasn't until I kind of leaned into my faith and realized like, just because that happened doesn't mean my whole life is going to be this series of like terrible trauma events. There will be joy. And there has been so much joy after she died. So that's another thing I tell that like 11, 13-year-old girls, like bad things might happen, but there's so many good things that are going to happen too. It's the monkey bars, right? You got your hands on your monkey bars and there's good and there's bad things happening all the time. So life is still filled with joy and with blessings. And there's going to be some hard, painful things that are going to shape you and grow you and make you lean on community. And through it all, God is with you in that journey and he loves you and he wants you to feel his presence and to walk with him and to be in peace. And amazing things are going to happen, even if there is pain along that journey.
Hey there, welcome in. For Mother's Day and Father's Day of 2021, I would love to put a project together, but to do that, I will need your help. If you'd like to participate, here's what you can do. Call 623-396-6069 and leave a voicemail. It can be anonymous. And look, I am a mom, I work, and I just put in my resignation letter as my son's first grade teacher. So no worries, I will not be answering your call. All right, so if you've picked up the phone and called the number, the next step, obviously, is to leave that voicemail you've always been wanting to leave. Parentless Podcast was born out of the idea that we all have questions or something we'd like to tell our parent if we could just pick up the phone and call them one more time. Now, I can't promise that they'll get this message, but you can at least send a voicemail out to the universe for your dead or estranged parent. I believe this will be a powerful display of all of the feelings, questions, comments, I'm sorry's, thank yous, and everything that we might ever wish that we could tell them. If this appeals to you, please call or share with a friend that might find this helpful.
You mentioned, we're in this grief community and we're helping others. And so tell me about some of the things that you have been able to do now to help others.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for asking. Well, I always knew I wanted, it's just so funny. I always had in the back of my mind being more of a public figure, and I always secretly wanted to be on stage. But you would never know that because I was super shy and super walled off. And like, I had this like little dream in my head, and then it was reality. So it was like 1% of me wanted it, but like 99% was like, your mom died, you're super tall, you're struggling in middle school. And that took most of my attention. But as time went on, that little voice got louder and louder. And I couldn't really tell what it was, but I would always daydream about doing music or whatever it was, but I was not confident enough to do that at that point. And so it wasn't until, again, after those 10 years, after lots of counseling, after getting married and going through all the fun that a couple of first years of marriage bring up, it wasn't until after that I felt like I was at a place where I was like, okay, I feel much more emotionally stable. I feel like God has taught me so much about all this stuff. I want to do something to help other people with this because I have been learning so much. I want to help other people learn because I wish I would have leaned into my grief on day one, not on 10 years later, day two. So what I do, again, I love to write music, and I've kind of decided to dedicate, you kind of mentioned See Me, and I have another song called Light a Candle for Me, which you heard earlier. I kind of decided this next chapter, I'm just going to put out like either grief songs or songs of encouragement. I just want to serve people in that way. I also have a workbook that I put out, not only the free version that you can get with Light a Candle for Me, but a much more in-depth version that I asked myself, and I said, what would have helped 13-year-old Miki pause? Because I even if I wanted to get help at that point, which I'm not sure I really did, but even if I did want to get help, I don't know how I would have started. And so I created this grief workbook it's just a 3-phase thing. It probably takes about 40 minutes if you from like start to back. And it helps you just kind of bring up memories. I call it My Heart Still Remembers. So that's where the memory part comes in. And it allows you to kind of be like, what was my mom like? And like to actually like pick your brain apart and put words to some of those emotions that that are pent up inside. Be like, she was blonde. She had a big smile. She smelled like this. She did this. This was the music she listened to. And it kind of allows me to like touch base with that memory because it's always there, right? And I feel like I get so busy that I forget to hear the ticking clock. But when I pause and I focus on the clock that's ticking in the background, I feel so much more at peace. And then it eventually goes through legacy and gratitude and how we can take that loss with us and allow it to change us for the better and connect with that loss more. And that was another thing I wish I would tell, 13-year-old Miki would be, you think that by not feeling your mom's emotions, like that's the best thing. But it's the exact opposite. You need to be in touch with her memory. You need to take on her legacy seriously. And you're going to feel so much more connected to her as you walk through life. And it doesn't have to feel like she died at 13 and like that's the end of that chapter, because that's not true at all. Like their legacy lives on through us. And when we touch base with that legacy on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, however you're comfortable with basis, you feel so much more connected to your parent and they don't feel as far away, perhaps is the better way to describe that. So that's that book. And then I also have my weekly show every Tuesday night live on Facebook where I, for half an hour, interview people like yourself who have very cool stories to share. And that's called The Healing Half. And we dissect various parts of grief that, sometimes I have people like talk about what it was like to lose a son. And so my hope is that people like myself who have not lost a son can learn how to better serve that type of person. Just you and I know probably too well, Steph, like the things people say that are so cringeworthy. You're like, oh, please don't say that ever. And so that's my hope of my show is there's like an education component of what should we do instead? Like, what should we say that's actually helpful? What should we do that's helpful? And so that's kind of my trifecta of things where I've got my music, my book, and my show. And I, like you kind of mentioned, I just hope, just like you're doing such great work. I just hope I can give people a place to not feel alone and to feel a little encouraged on their journey. And if hope comes, that would be fantastic.
You mentioned, okay, so on your show, it's a Facebook Live show, and it's called The Healing Half.
It's on Facebook Live. And then if you want to, feel free to sign up for my email list. Not only will you get that Light a Candle for Me free workbook, but then I send like the replay out every week. So then you could see like the YouTube or the Facebook. And then I type in like the main talking points. Be like, if you don't get to watch the show, here are the 3 big takeaways. So I would love it if anybody wants to jump on that email list. If not, no worries.
You mentioned that the memory of someone, keeping their memory alive. So is that a way that is that another coping mechanism for you?
Yes.
And how do you do that?
Yes, absolutely. That was probably one of my biggest revelations within the most recent years. Again, 10 years of denial, a nice fun little counseling period. Realized, I have to process my grief. And then this revelation came up where I was thinking about, everyone would tell me, and I'm sure you get this all the time from people who knew your parents, that, you're so much like her, or you look like her, or just various things of like physical qualities that like people would comment on about my mom and I. And it would always be kind of bittersweet because I would say, wow, like that's cool that like she lives on in that way. But it felt empty in the sense that it felt like I wanted more of it, but I didn't know how to get it. So I and again, I don't know where this came from. Thank you, Lord. I just realized kind of one day when I connect with her memory, I feel connected to her and I almost walk with more peace. I feel more grounded because parents are foundational. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And so when you've got that foundation ripped from you, it feels good to have parts of it back in place, and you just feel so much more calm. And so if you are listening and you're like, well, how do I start? First, if you want to get my book, please do. I hope that helps you, because that's like a really one-stop shop. But I would say start by thinking what lessons they taught you, or what did they do that you thought was really cool. For example, my grandma, so my mom's mom, kind of became that maternal figure for me, and she passed away recently. So that's been a whole nother journey. But one of the things my grandma did that I just was so in awe of, because I'm not naturally good at it, she was such a good home maker. She cleaned and kept her kitchen like tidy and never complained about having to make dinner for people that she loved. In fact, that's how she served them. And I just kind of laugh, because that's like not my strong suit at all. But, I'm just like, okay, grandma loved to cook a spaghetti. Like, that was one of her things. We would always just have like homemade spaghetti at her house. So I can cook spaghetti, and I can honor grandma in that. And I can say, okay, grandma liked to cook spaghetti. I'm going to cook spaghetti. And even if I don't have to tell anybody, I know it's in honor of grandma. And if you can take it a step further, if you've got kids or anything at home, or a friend, or be like, yeah, my grandma loves spaghetti and I'm making spaghetti. It's a really easy segue to just like share a part of yourself without having to like go into that. I miss her so much and I'm so sad, because that's a lot more vulnerable and perhaps not what you want to be talking about as you're cooking dinner. But for me, it's really great to tell my husband, oh yeah, like my mom really liked this meal, and that's why we're having it tonight. And it's like, okay, we don't really talk about it more than that, but to me it means a lot, and I'm connecting with their memories in that way. So that would be the biggest thing. Just find things that they did. Maybe there's like a movie or an album that you're like, oh, like this is their thing. And you can like listen to it in the car and just say, oh, this was my mom. You don't have to tell anybody, but just in your mind, like this was my dad's favorite song, or this was theirs. And just to bring their favorites back into your life and to continue them. And I know you mentioned you have kids. I don't have kids yet, and then being able to share that with them, that's a pretty cool way to be able to share something they never will experience with them, and kind of keeps a legacy alive. And of course, it could go beyond meals and food and music, which is all good stuff, but you could have qualities. Like my grandpa was super patient. I'm not super patient. I have to work on that, but I remember his patience, and I can take that and I can say, okay, I'm going to try and be more patient today in honor of grandpa, and just see the cool ripple effects that has.
Did your mom, you talked about favorites, so did your mom have a favorite song or a favorite saying or anything that was
yeah. You ask such nice questions, by the way. You are so great. I would say I remember listening to two things. One was the ABBA, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Greatest Hits album. So we always listened to that black and gold CD, and like money, 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 like all those fun, awesome songs. So that would probably be like the one that rises to the top. And then we had a Dixie Chicks tape. If you remember those tape that, oh my gosh. So we had a Dixie Chicks tape, and it was the Wide Open Spaces album on the tape. So anytime I hear like that, and oh gosh, I don't know if Landslide was on that song, but anytime I hear like the Dixie Chicks, I kind of think of my mom too. So ABBA and Dixie Chicks, I'm like, okay, yep, we're connecting. We're crying as I'm driving to the grocery store. It's feeling good. It's a good cry. It's a good connect.
Do you ever find yourself having a time where you just miss her and you're like, oh, I got to play Dixie Chicks, or do you use it in that way?
I should use it in that way, because I need to do better jobs at channeling that. But I would say more when I miss my mom, I turn a lot to words. That's kind of through whether it's music or writing, I love to write. And so I'd rather journal. That's usually where I go to when I need to like word vomit. Like I'm feeling something and I just got to put words to it. So I usually journal. So usually when I connect with my mom's memory, it's in that sense if I'm like really sad. However, I've got friends who absolutely like they're missing their mom, they're missing their grandpa. My grandpa loved polka music. So I'll throw on polka music sometime while I'm cooking and I'm crying in the kitchen and my husband's like, what's wrong? I'm like, don't worry about it. I'm just feeling sad because of grandpa. He's used to it at this point. You know, when you're in the grief world, you cry a lot and he just has learned not to ask too many questions. And so I would definitely encourage people to do that if that sounds like a good idea for you. Everybody's going to have their own form of coping. And I definitely think music, oh my gosh, music is one of the best ways to connect with somebody.
Of course. And that makes sense. I don't know why I didn't think about, of course you would write, because you do write music and you have all these beautiful lyrics that you've written. And I'm sure that some of those phrases might have come from just times where you sat down to write in a moment of need. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So I would definitely say if you like music and you want to connect, see me and light a candle. If you listen to the lyrics, like you said, Steph, that's absolutely, it's like my revelations, my stories, things that I feel like I needed to hear myself coming through. And then you mentioned that line in See Me of you don't have to be strong. And to back up a sentence before that, it's of all the questions left unanswered, my love for you never wavered. It's a loose rhyme, but we'll go with it. When you think of me, you don't have to be strong. With every thought that you have, my memory lives on. And that's the second verse. And that was something that was I just needed to hear, because I think all death leaves you with questions and it leaves you with anger. I mean, I can't think of anyone who's lost a parent that doesn't have some frustration and anger. So it's like, there are questions we are just going to have to accept we do not get the answer to. And that's so hard. But there's hope in the sense that they are not gone forever. They live on through us. And to me, that's a kind of another basis. We talked about hope earlier, knowing that their memory is alive. And I believe their spirit is alive too. That brings me so much joy to just know I'm honoring my mom. And even though I don't know, I'm so bad at math if that's not coming through, however old she would be today. So she should still be alive. Like, she should absolutely still be alive by the world standards. She'd be I think she'd be 56. And so I just think like, okay, like she didn't get to live to 56, but I'm still here. And what can I do to keep her memory alive? And there's just so much empowerment and so much hope when we think that their memory lives on through us, and kind of taking that up as a challenge to rise to has been really, really healing for me. And I hope that it inspires healing in others too.
Thank you for taking your grief and making yourself a speaking piece for everyone. I did see one of your videos where you were on stage, and so that was great as well. So I'm just really excited. You know, we all treat this differently. So I really like when we can bring something out for others from what has happened to us.
Thank you so much, Steph. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And one thing I want to throw out here too is one of the lines that I remember: we can't go back to the way that it used to be.
Oh yeah.
That was a really huge one. And I mean, we talk about grief in so many different ways, but like with COVID right now, we're coming up on 1 year. There's so many things right now, including the many, 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 many deaths. We can't go back to the way that it used to be. So I just encourage you, if you're listening and you've had a loss, maybe it's not a death of anyone, or if it's just a loss of something, but especially also a death, definitely check out this song. Now, is that line in Light a Candle for Me?
That is. Yep. Okay. Yep. You are such a good fan. I am so blown away by you. Thank you.
And the reason why we're talking so much about Light a Candle for Me is because when was it released?
It was released on February 5th on all major platforms.
And today is February 20th, so it's only been out for 15 days. So that's why we're excited to talk about this new release for you. We are getting a little close on time, so I want to make sure that we get everything in, and I want to be respectful of your time as well, because what do you get to do today?
I get to hang out with my dad today. So he came to visit, which is so nice. It's always so good to see him. It's been a while, as you mentioned with COVID. There's a lot there. So we made sure we quarantined, and then now we're together. So he's visiting. I'm temporarily in New Mexico. So we're going to go up to Santa Fe today and just really enjoy spending some dad time, which is great.
We'll be right back.
If you've enjoyed what you've heard, please consider sharing the show with a friend or rating and reviewing wherever you're listening right now. This will help get the word out about the show, and if one person can be helped by listening to someone's story here, that is amazing. If you would like to share your story with me, you can visit the website at www.backhomemedia.com/parentlesspodcast. You can also email me at parentlesspodcast@gmail.com. Another way to get a hold of me is to find me on Instagram or Facebook, also at Parentless Podcast. And lastly, if you're a phone person, please leave me a voicemail at 623-396-6069. If you love the show and you'd like to help with any special projects that might go on at Parentless Podcast or just be privy to some special extras, go ahead and visit patreon.com/parentlesspodcast.
Did your mom have a favorite phrase or just a joke or anything that she would say that you remember?
Ooh, that's such a good question. And it's interesting because my sister and I recently on my show just kind of shared our joint story of losing mom. And one of the things my sister Katie said was, I'm not sure I miss her or what she was for me. And that was kind of an interesting thought in the sense that I find, because I'm still kind of working through a lot of the trauma, I don't remember as much as I feel like I should remember. There's like gaps in my memory where I was like, I don't remember what Christmas really was like. And I should. Like I was 13, like old enough.
Yeah, but
like
you had some trauma. You had some trauma.
Some trauma.
Don't beat yourself up. I feel the same way.
Thank you. So if I, just to be 100% totally vulnerable with you, I don't remember a phrase or anything in particular. So I'm sorry about that. I wish I had like a saying or something, but even the thing that I do remember though, that just like always makes me so happy. So I'm not sure if you can tell, but I'm super pale. I'm not sure where that came from because both my parents tanned very well. I do not, but I remember, so it wasn't a phrase as much, but I remember the smell of, and like the feel of her sun-kissed skin. Like I can smell it. And I don't know, that sounds kind of weird, but if you think about like you're hugging your parent and like their arm is kind of nearby, and I'm going to cry because that's a very good memory. But I would say that brings me a lot of joy. So when I feel like the sun on my pale skin, which isn't often because I usually am covered up with sunscreen, hat, long sleeve shirt, but every once in a while I'll go a little crazy and let my arm out. And at that point I'll feel the sun on my skin, and it's a weird connection where I have that memory and I just love to feel the sun on my skin. So in a way, that's the phrase that kind of sticks with me, even though it's not to words.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be words. That's a beautiful picture. You've mentioned you've been to counseling and you highly recommend counseling. And so tell me, I know everybody, of course, is different in their journey, but what kind of counseling have you been to, if you want to speak to that, and what about it has helped you?
Yes. So you're so right. Everyone's different. But I would say more than often than not, you probably would benefit from talk therapy, where it's just talking through it. And one of my guests on my show said something about, to get through it, we have to talk through it. So like the more you tell your story, the more therapeutic it is. And I never thought of it that way, but that's why it's so important to let people into your life, whether it's a counselor or friends, and to tell them the story. And I'm not sure if you've ever had it where you get off the phone with somebody and then you tell the same story to someone else. Then you tell the same story. And you're like, thank goodness they can't hear. They're going to think I'm a mad woman, like telling the same story over and over. But that's kind of how, as humans, we communicate, is through repetitive words. And I would say that when you get to go to the counselor, it's their job to listen to you. And it's their job to ask you to tell the same story and your emotions over and over and over again. So you don't have to ever feel like you're burdening them, because they literally want to listen to you. So I would say just go in there, talking and trying your best. And it's hard because I understand what it's like on the other side to not want to let people in and to not let that facade down. But it feels like 1 billion pounds fall off your shoulder when you can just sit down with a stranger, essentially cry, and then go back out into the world and nobody's the wiser. Not that we shouldn't be vulnerable publicly, but it's not always easy to do that. And that's my shtick, right? Back in the day, that was so hard for me. So to have a counselor, to have a private session was such a therapy for me. And then I would also say, if you're interested, look into EMDR. I did that, and that was super helpful. COVID ruined it. So I'm bitter because I was like moving forward on this train, and I was like, I love EMDR. And then we had to move to in-person or Zoom counseling, which is fine, but I'm really excited to get back in person because I think you kind of, at least my counselor, you have to be in person to do that. But I would say if you lost a parent at any age, but especially as a kid, there's a lot of trauma there. And it's easy to think because other people have been through it, it must not be that big of a deal. But our bodies don't care about social norms, right? Like our body knows we went through trauma. And even if we look out to the world and say, oh, well, parents died, that's how this story goes. Just because it's common doesn't mean it's easy. And you probably have undiagnosed trauma that you're going through. I know I certainly did. I would never have considered myself a trauma victim because I always thought, oh, that's like people who've gone through really, really, really hard, terrible ABC News, spotlight hour stuff. And that's not true. Trauma doesn't have to be newsworthy in order to be impactful on your life. So you probably have some trauma. I'd encourage you to lean into that, to take ownership of that title. I know that's helped me a lot to be like, okay, like just because it's common doesn't mean it's not important. And it doesn't mean it doesn't deserve some airtime in my counseling session. So EMDR, talk therapy, try it out. What's the old, try it, you'll like it.
Yes, I've been told don't knock it if you haven't tried it, which is very true. Definitely. So that's something I haven't tried, and I really enjoy talking to everyone because it seems that it's very helpful. What is one thing that you, and I say one thing, I don't really mean one specific thing, but something or things that you would want to say to your mom now if you could?
Oh gosh. So one of my regrets, and I'm working on letting it go because you're a kid and you can't hold yourself ever to anything in the past. What I think the Dalai Lama said, and I could be totally misquoting this, but there's 2 days you can't control, yesterday and tomorrow. And it's like, yes, like, right. Like I can't control the fact, but I do still have a little tinge of regret, if I'm being honest. I remember being in the kitchen with my mom. And she was sick. So this was 7th grade. So this was before she died in 7th grade. And she came up to me and she's like, I heard a little rumor that so-and-so in your class has a crush on you. And again, remembering I was very single, very wanting to have boys show interest. But the particular boy that had a crush on me was like literally a foot shorter than me and just like such a sweetheart. But there was like no attraction there. And instead of leaning in and talking about boys, like I could tell she wanted to, for whatever reason, I just did it. And I was like, well, that's too bad. I don't even know what I said. And I just kind of moved on to the next topic and fluttered away busy doing something. Hindsight, of course, I regret that conversation. So I think the first thing that I would probably like tell would just be like, 'cause she missed my entire dating career. And so I'd probably start with just like, well, talking about my husband because he was my first boyfriend. And then we ended up getting married. So it was one of those crazy, thank you, Lord, things that I got very blessed with the first one. But I would probably just tell her about Sean and like all the drama that we went through, like with distance dating and the other boys that kind of were on the radar. And it's a funny story, but I would probably share that with her and just have like that girl gossip moment that I think we all kind of crave so much. And not that I couldn't talk with my dad about that, but there's something about, dads are going to be like, that's interesting. What did he say? Where moms might be a little more like, not necessarily going to go attack somebody if they hurt your feelings. Oh, maybe they would. I guess I don't know. So I'd probably talk boy drama. And wins, not just drama, like the good, the marriage, the wedding, all the fun stuff that we've been able to do as a married couple so far. That's probably where I'd start. As silly as that sounds, that sounds super fun.
Okay, so the next part of this is with your spiritual beliefs, your faith. Do you feel like your mom is looking down on you?
Absolutely. Yep. And that brings me, you kind of mentioned hope earlier. For me, I don't know how to have hope aside from the fact that I'll see her again one day. And that makes me really happy to just think like, okay, like this isn't over. We'll talk one day. And I definitely, I don't necessarily have just like particular stories. Like, I've talked with people who've had like really vivid, like experiences where they're like, whoa, like there's no other way to describe it other than like a ghost or a mom or something like that. So I haven't had necessarily one of those, but I definitely have felt like random memories that come up at like times as I'm like walking in the grocery store or something like totally mundane. I'm learning that those random memories aren't random at all. I really think that our brain either associates with them or that they're divine. I guess I don't know. Where these things that pop into our brain, I think pop up for a reason. And I just know I'll have random dreams. I'll have random memories that are so insignificant, but I feel like it's a little like tap on, I'm sorry, this is so emotional. I just feel like it's a little tap on my shoulder, be like, I'm still here, which is really nice. So thank you for allowing me to cry. That's what this is all about, right?
Exactly. Yes. This is a space where we remember and we laugh and we cry, and it's all good.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I love that picture of just that little tap on the shoulder that I'm still here. And I believe through your work on yourself, that's why you're able to feel that. So I really enjoy that.
Feel those taps. That's such a good point. Yep. They're always going to be taps. It's whether or not we choose to acknowledge them or not.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I have really enjoyed our talk today. Can you tell me where can we reach you? Where can we find you?
Absolutely. And I've really enjoyed our talk today too. So thank you so much for allowing me to be here and to share my story. It's absolutely an honor. If you want to be in touch with me, there's a lot of ways, but perhaps like the easiest way would just be heading to mikispear.com. You can get your free workbook for Light a Candle for Me that comes with that candle lighting ceremony, which we didn't really talk too much about today, but like that's a really therapeutic way to connect with them on days that are hard. You know, holidays come around, you just set aside an hour and just do this like reflection. And I assure you, you will feel lighter and happier and more connected to their memory. So I would say just head to my website, mikispear.com, sign up for my email list. And then on there, it's going to have all my, Facebook, Instagram, replays of the show. So it's kind of a one-stop shop. So if you don't mind, head to mikispear.com. I'd love to connect with you. And if you are listening and any part of my story resonates with you or anything that I said, please just reach out. I'd love to meet new people. I'd love to hear what they're going through, and just share stories is one of my favorite things in the world. So please don't hesitate to ever reach out to me. I'm really excited to get to know you well too.
And I'd like to say for the listeners that they can't see you, but for the most of this conversation, you've had a smile on your face. So I can really tell that this is something that you do love to talk about. So thank you for your work. Is there anything else that we didn't get to talk about that you wanted to bring up?
I think the biggest thing I would just say again is if you head to my website, my hope is to bring hope, as you kind of talked about, to bridge the gap between grief and hope is something I sometimes will say. And I know everybody's different. So if you are listening to this, remember, do not compare your grief to anybody else's. Your grief is important. And it's easy to perhaps hear stories. I know I've had people tell me, they're like, well, my mom died when I was in my 20s, not when I was 13. I can't, and they're almost degrading their loss because they hear my story. And admittedly, because we're all human, I've heard people whose parents have both died in car crashes or something at the same time. And I think, oh my gosh, like my mom died, but like they lost both their parents in a car accident. And I just think it's so important to just kind of maybe have the last disclaimer of all loss is hard. And so please don't do yourself the disservice of comparing your loss to anyone else's. That's certainly not what I want for my story. I know that's not what Steph wants for her story. We want to encourage you, not to make you feel lesser. So just know your loss is super important. Please lean into it. And if there's anything on mikispear.com that can help you, I would just be so honored to be able to come alongside you in that grief journey.
Thank you so much, Miki Spear, and I enjoy your music and I appreciate our talk today. Thank you for coming on with me.
My honor. Thank you so much, Steph. Really appreciate it.
Parentless Podcast is recorded in Phoenix, Arizona. Find us on social media and most major podcast platforms. Music provided by Colin Lococo and the Revolving Birds. Studio and editing provided by Back Home Media. Check out one of the many shows on our network. I am your host, Stephanie Rilliford.